So, how does a group of nomadic warriors from the vast, open steppes end up becoming the protectors and rulers of one of the world's great religions? Welcome to The Explainer, where today we're tracing the absolutely incredible journey of the Turkic peoples and their transformation into the leaders of powerful Islamic empires.
This question, right here, it gets to the very heart of a story that spans centuries and literally reshapes continents. We're talking about a profound shift in faith, in culture, and in power. So let's dive in and trace that incredible path, starting out on the plains of Central Asia and ending at the very heart of the Islamic Caliphate. To really understand this massive transformation, we have to start at the beginning. You see, before Islam ever reached them, the early Turks lived in a world that was just buzzing with diverse beliefs. It was anything but a monolithic culture.
At the very core of their traditional beliefs was Gök Tengri. This faith centered on a single, supreme, celestial deity, an all-powerful sky god. Now, this concept of one ultimate being is a really crucial detail for later in our story, so keep that in the back of your mind.
But you have to remember, the steppes were a total crossroads of ideas. Mahayana Buddhism, carried along the bustling Silk Road all the way from India, found a very receptive audience. Key cities like Bukhara and Balkh became these vibrant centers of Buddhist learning, which just goes to show how connected the Turks were to global intellectual currents.
And then you have Manichaeanism, a fascinating faith that blended elements of Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, and Christianity. It was spread by the Sogdians, who were basically the master merchants of the Silk Road, and it became so influential that the powerful Uyghur Khaganate actually declared it their official state religion in the mid-8th century. And the connections didn't stop there. Those same trade routes also brought them into contact with the West, introducing the story and Christianity into the mix. This just adds another layer to what was an incredibly diverse and interconnected religious world long before the arrival of Islam.
Okay, now this right here is a crucial insight. That core concept of the Gök Tengri faith, the belief in one supreme sky god, it basically created a conceptual bridge to Islam's strict monotheism. Because of this, the eventual turn to Islam felt less like adopting a completely foreign idea and, maybe more like a familiar evolution of their own ancient beliefs.
So, with this whole marketplace of different faiths, why did they ultimately turn toward Islam? Well, this was the critical turning point, and how it happened might actually surprise you.
There's this common myth that the Turkic peoples converted to Islam at the point of a sword, but the historical reality is just so much more nuanced. Yeah, early Arab military campaigns made some inroads, but they didn't lead to mass conversion. The real, lasting change was peaceful, and it was driven by merchants, missionaries, and just plain old cultural exchange.
And this timeline shows just how gradual the whole process was. I mean, it starts with simple contact between merchants on the Silk Road in the 7th and 8th centuries. Then you move into the 9th and 10th centuries, and you see the Persian Samanid Dynasty actively promoting Sunni Islam. But the real game changers, the Sufi mystics. They presented Islam in a way that just clicked with Turkic culture, and that led to the mass, voluntary conversions we see right around 960.
So, with this new faith came a new identity and a really powerful tool for building states. And let me tell you, no one mastered this better than the Seljuk Turks, who went from a tribal confederation to being the de facto rulers of the Islamic heartland.
The first Seljuk Sultan, Turgro Bey, pulled off an absolute political masterstroke, and you can see the steps right here. First, he unites the Turkmen tribes, but instead of just marching on Baghdad as a conqueror, he takes a totally different approach. He sends a letter to the Abbasid Caliphate, the spiritual leader of Islam, pledging loyalty. Now, at the time, the Caliph was basically a prisoner of a rival dynasty. So, Turgro answers the Caliph's call for help, marching into Baghdad not as an invader, but as a liberator and a protector.
This quote from a historical account just captures the strategy perfectly. The Seljuks framed their military takeover as an act of service. They weren't overthrowing the caliph, they were protecting him. It was an absolutely brilliant move that gave their raw military power immense religious and political legitimacy across the entire Sunni world.
So this model of combining Turkic military power with Islamic legitimacy, it was perfected by the Seljuk successors, the Ottomans, and they would use it to build one of the longest-lasting and most influential empires in all of history.
As the Ottoman Empire expanded into Christian and Jewish lands, it faced a classic imperial problem. How do you govern a vast, multi-religious population? Their ingenious solution was the millet system,
It organized society by religious community, not by ethnicity, and it granted groups like Christians and Jews a ton of autonomy over their own affairs. This was a super pragmatic approach that basically outsourced local governance and helped maintain stability for centuries.
There's a famous story about the Ottoman Sultan Selim I conquering Egypt in 1517. The story goes that the last Abbasid Caliph supposedly hands over the title of Caliph in a big formal ceremony. It's a really dramatic moment. But did it actually happen like that?
Well, the modern historical consensus is that this whole formal ceremony was probably a later invention, a piece of political propaganda to bolster Ottoman legitimacy. In reality, claiming the title of Caliph was just a savvy strategic move. I mean, after conquering the Islamic heartlands of Egypt and Syria, the Sultan was already the most powerful Muslim ruler on earth. Adopting the title just made it official.
So, after centuries of conversion, state building, and empire, what was the final result? What did this new Turkish Islamic identity actually look like in practice?
The key takeaway here is that this wasn't a replacement of one culture with another. Not at all. It was a synthesis, a fusion. As you can see, Sunni Islam formed the core, but it was deeply interwoven with ancient Turkic traditions, the spiritualism of Sufism, and even some faint echoes of their pre-Islamic, shamanistic past.
This quote just drives the point home perfectly. Even centuries after converting, epic tales like the Book of Dedikorkut, which is a foundational text of Turkic oral tradition, are still filled with older pre-Islamic customs and beliefs. They had become devout Muslims for sure, but they remained distinctly and unapologetically Turkish. The story of the Turks' journey into the Islamic world gives us a pretty powerful answer. It shows that faith can be a profound force for unity, a source of immense political legitimacy, and the bedrock for empires that would not only rule vast territories, but would also go on to reshape the entire course of world history.